So we're back for part 2 of an interview with Mark Kevin Charlton-Davis. And I think we left off, you've met your grandfather and you've seen his place, but you don't really get to spend a lot of time with him, and you're very intrigued by the exposure that you've had to both African Americans and also your curiosity about native cultures, particularly in Africa, but also around the world, and the dearth of, accessible material for you, and then your exposures to Malcolm X and Martin Luther King and Peter Tosh and Bob Marley, and sort of exploding out of that very constrictive Jehovah's Witness environment. And then also being separated from your mother by that environment. And then you encountered Malidoma Somé's work around this time too. And so lead us into, you somehow get to Africa.
Yeah. So leading up to that, that exposure of watching Malidoma go through that initiation process as a child in the book of Water and Spirit, it was it really related to me because of that survival that you had. I mean, they would take 20 to 30 kids out into the jungle, and they had to survive on their own. They were taught lessons. There were 4 or 5 elders there, so there was adult supervision to some extent. But you're talking 12-year-old to 16-year-old roughly kids that were all brought out into the forest to survive. It brought up a lot in me because this is for the purpose of explaining why I wanted to connect with Malidoma. When I was a child, if I went out, you go outside, if I'm carrying a sandwich, like a ham sandwich or something like that, and back then we called it sandwich. Sandwich. Yeah. But if I went out with the sandwich, the teenage kids would take it away from you, right? Sometimes with a gun. They'd put a gun in your head and take your sandwich.
Wow.
Yeah. And one time on the beach, this fat kid, he couldn't get away. We all ran away because this guy had a gun, right? And we all ran, but the fat kid couldn't get away. And they found some human waste in a plastic bag that washed up on shore, and so it was green and blue and all kinds of stuff. And they made him eat it. They squeezed it into his mouth and made him eat it while holding a gun to his head. I don't know why I stood to watch that, but I was in so much shock. I stood and watched.
Where and when did that kind of thing take place?
That was in Santa Monica, maybe 66, 67, something like that.
Wow.
Yeah, my mom, she had a breakdown, nervous breakdown, she calls it, but they gave her blood transfusions, like 3 of them. So I'm not quite sure what that's about. But she was, for almost 2 years, she was like absent. Maybe she was there, maybe she wasn't, or came and left, but I almost never saw her. So we were babysat a lot, and I spent a lot of time. Like, by the time I was 7, I knew Los Angeles. Like, I knew how to get on a bus and go downtown. We went everywhere, did everything. 3 a.m, I'd come home, and I didn't want to be at home with that babysitter because she would molest. She would attempt to molest. And so I would try to stay out as long as I could, So I spent a lot of time on the street. And so that story about Malidoma having to deal with molestation in the Catholic Church, and then having to run away from that as a teenager, in his late teens, and run away from that and, 100-mile walk back to his village, the stuff he had to go through there. I related to it. I understood that. So, by the time I was ready to come see him, I after I finished painting the last house I was working on, the guy paid me $6,000 or whatever. I packed everything I owned in my Jeep Cherokee and came out to California. And I've been out here ever since, but it was Malidoma that brought me out here. Didn't know where he lived. I went to LA first, stayed with my uncle for a couple of days, got robbed. Everything I owned that was in the Jeep Cherokee was spread all along the street. As far as you could see, the stuff was everywhere. I don't even know what they took. They took all jewelry and stuff like that. But my clothes, they just left them all over the street. But I stayed there for a couple days, and then I left LA and drove up to Oakland because I knew he was in San Francisco, but I didn't know where. Got on 580 and pulled up into Oakland Hills and fell asleep up there. And I managed to get a hold of his society, and they connected me with somebody who was willing to take me in because there was a special event coming. So they allowed me to come and spend the night there and stuff like that. I gave them my book. The book was passed on to Malidoma Somé. My notebook. Writing, just written epiphanies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Silly stuff probably, but it was enough to catch his interest to where he decided to call me. And he called me, and sure enough, right where I fell asleep on 580 was right where his office was. So I knew exactly how to get back there, and it was right up on Skyline Boulevard. And so I went there, and he had me work for him as the secretary for a couple of years at that point.
And what years are those about?
1999 to 2001.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, did you see him in ceremony? Did he teach
A lot of ceremonies,
you?
yeah.
Tell us.
Yeah.
Tell us what happened.
Yeah. The ceremonies are beautiful. Now, granted, there's a lot of negative, things surrounding Malidoma, right? And whether it's his stuff, whether the stuff is real or not. But I kind of understand where he's coming from, because he was trying to take things that are very traditional and transcribe them into something that we could use here in this country. It's not going to be exact. We don't have the exact anything. So.
Yeah, it's a similar problem with like Michael Harner and shamanism, and him having been an anthropologist, right? He's sort of producing an Americanized version in a way.
Yeah, Michael Harner stayed at the place I was at. Remember I was saying I was staying at a place right after I fell asleep, and I finally found a place where I could go. Michael Harner was staying there.
Wow.
Yeah. Through Nairobi. I think it's in Colorado.
Yeah.
He was a speaker there, and there was a circuit of speakers, shamanic speakers. So Malidoma was one, and he was another one, Michael Harner, and there was a few other ones, yeah.
Harner was my first direct human exposure to shamanistic traditions, and there's certainly, it's easy to be critical about, various features of how it gets sort of captured by white culture and so on, all of these things. Yes, of course we can be concerned about that, but it was a really profound thing to meet him. And I was in a room with about 200 other people, but I managed to get his attention when I first went in. And so he paid attention to me personally throughout the thing. So I got some like kind of one-on-one stuff with him. And at the time, I was curious, and I'd read Castaneda, but I was also skeptical, right? Like I had the experience, he did the drumming, right? Taught us like 3 basic things, right? How to journey, how to read a stone for someone.
Yeah.
And one other thing that I'm not sure if I can remember. But the journeying was the main thing.
Yeah, it's for me too.
Yeah.
It's Castaneda, yeah.
And, I had the experience, right? You're supposed to like find in your memory, you find a cave or a hole in a tree or a nest in the ground or a whirlpool or maybe a waterfall where the water's folding into itself.
Yeah.
And you go there to start in your mind.
Yeah.
And then the drumming's going like pum, 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 pum,
Yeah.
pum, out like this, right? And then you go down a tunnel until you come out in some landscape. And then you look for an animal that's not a predator. And you have a exchange with the animal. Right? And so I had this. And in fact, the first animal led me to a second tunnel. And the tunnel led me to a different landscape, and there was a different animal down there, and they were both then there with me. But I couldn't really tell that it wasn't just my imagination. until many years later when I became well aware that it was not my imagination. So you meet Malidoma, and you're his secretary.
Yeah.
Any initiations happen? What tell us about?
I got to witness other people's initiations. I was like an assistant. Right? So I got this. Even though he was a public speaker, his daily work was going to visit people and helping them individually. A lot of them are just trying to get out of jail or court cases, but there was a lot of different issues, right, that he would do.
Basically, not just a healer, but also like a troubleshooter and a healer. Yeah, something like this.
Yeah, and he did the best he could. Some of the things were ridiculous, to me. But I was brand new on all of it. But sometimes it's just like, come on, guys. This isn't real. This is not happening. No, she's not possessed with a demon. No. She's just acting. She's rich. She's bored. That's how it felt. But it seemed like whenever he tried to do something, he did it in such a way to incorporate, to at least have a space, because that's their imagination. And the way he described it, which is the most beautiful thing I've heard ever, probably, is that the way into the shamanic path, that spiritual path, is through the imagination. Yeah, that's the opening door. That's the portal. So even if you're imagining a tree, a hole in a tree, or a cave or anything like that, it's starting with the imagination. That imagery becomes like a vector for us.
Yes. What was one of the more surprising things you saw him do?
You want to hear the first surprise?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's probably not fair, but he passed away, so he won't say anything. At least not right now. I think it was my second day of working as a secretary, and he had me answering all the calls. He had me doing responding to all the emails. He said, just put my name, Malidoma, at the end, or Patrice, or whatever.
Sure.
Lieutenant's him, and respond to these people. I understood it, but it was wrong, But he had 300 or 400 emails a day, and he didn't know how to handle it. He didn't know what to do with it. So, and maybe he was testing me to see what I would do. So, I did it for that reason. I forgot what I was going to say.
Something surprising that you saw.
Oh, yeah. So one of the phone messages, was his wife, Sobonfu. And she's like saying, I know you're with that woman. And then she started speaking in her language, right? In Dagara, right? The Dagara language. And it's like, oh my God, what is that? I didn't know what that was. And then, so when I went to one of our ceremonies and there was a lot of women there, I started understanding what was happening, because, they're just really attracted to him,
yes.
Like dozens.
Yes, the power.
Yeah.
And the fame and everything, right?
Yeah.
The power.
And he had a lot lot of character.
Yeah.
Very
charming and charismatic, I'm sure.
Yeah, very charismatic, So but I couldn't understand it, but his wife was so beautiful. It's like, I don't get it. She was absolutely beautiful. And she was doing the same work he was doing. Like,
oh, wow.
She even had her own books and everything,
Her name again?
Sobonfu.
Sobonfu.
Sobonfu. Sobonfu, yeah.
Okay, so you were surprised to see that basically he kind of had a harem.
Yeah.
Essentially, right?
Yep.
Okay.
And then once people discovered me as his secretary, and that, he was paying for my trips to Africa and stuff like that, they started latching onto me,
Oh, yeah.
But I didn't know how to handle it as a Jehovah's Witness, that recently just left the church.
Sure. Please continue.
Yeah, I didn't know how to accept it. So, I would kind of flirt a little bit, or I'd get semi-involved without no kissing or touching or anything. I think one girl I did kiss, but I didn't handle any of it well. Yeah, but it was interesting.
You were still quite young in many ways.
Mentally, especially.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Almost a virgin in some
Yeah.
ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At what age now?
Oh, jeez. Okay, so this would have been 99. What does that make me? Almost 40. Does that sound right? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, almost 40.
Wow.
Yeah.
And still had pretty limited experience.
Really limited. Yeah.
I mean, did you have some children yet?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I had at least 3. Yeah.
Okay.
Different experiences, different women. One was because of the church, and one of them was to get out of the church, and the third one was to get back in. Everything was around the Jehovah's Witness. But I didn't have any experience with dating, like none. Like even these women I married, we never actually dated. Not a single moment of dating.
Yeah, I don't. Honestly, I have very little experience with dating. I know what the idea is, but I've always just met a girl that I love pretty much immediately, and then we're just together.
Yeah.
Right? There's no dating.
Yeah. That's what happened.
It wasn't like, try a few different flavors or anything like that.
Yeah.
It was just like, oh no, you.
Yeah.
You and me. Yeah, we're together.
Grab their hair.
That's not my style, but I'm romantic. So surprising things that you saw, anything in terms of power that you saw with Malidoma? Did you see him do anything that you really were like, wow, what was that?
Outside of his speech, no. No. There were some things that happened that were involving other elders, not him alone. Yeah.
Understood. So circle, kind of.
Oh, yeah. A very deep circle. Yeah, when he got his initiation into eldership, which was the second time I went back to Africa, when he got initiation into eldership, he was there was at least 400 maybe shamans there.
Really?
To acknowledge his eldership. Yeah, at least 400 maybe.
Oh my Lord.
Yeah.
That's unimaginable.
Yeah.
400.
Yeah.
There can't be anything like that in South America.
I don't think so.
No.
Not at this level, yeah.
It's because it's complicated. The population hasn't been decimated in the same way that it has been decimated, at least not in certain areas. In certain areas, it has not been decimated.
Yeah. And especially the religious practices. Yeah. Burkina Faso has the highest rate of this traditional indigenous religious practice of any place in the world.
Wow.
Yeah.
And this is where Malidoma is supposedly from?
Yes.
And it's trustworthy that he's from there?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so that part's true.
Yeah, even as recently as yesterday, I'm still in contact with his family. Almost every day.
Wow,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, no evidence of actual power that you saw, and no initiations for you with Malidoma?
I had initiations with him.
Okay.
I did.
Okay.
As far as power, when you say power, there were experiences and things like that, but not like, that seemed like impossible. That didn't happen. It was only my internal experiences that I went through with him. There was a point where we were supposed to see Contomble, and he advertised it that way, and that's why all of these people came, Americans, to see
Who is Contomble?
The little dwarf people that live underground with long penises that wrap around their necks, and they're hairy and got long pointy ears. And we were supposed to see that. That was in the cave, right? So all of these people, there was at least 30 Americans, between 20 and 30 Americans. And we drove them out to the middle of nowhere, out to this cave, and it wasn't real. It wasn't real. It was really dark in there, and I could hear the little voice and all of that stuff. But I could also see. At that time, my vision was extremely good. I could see that it was a little boy. Not only was it a little boy in that cave pretending, but he was a twin, and I just saw him outside. I said, you know, Eli Jimul, they're the same. You know, it's a twin. And I got it verified that the boy that I was pointing to was a twin.
Mm.
You know, and at that point, I think Malidoma didn't like me anymore.
Mm.
Yeah, but I mean, he should have
Because
let me
you
in on
had
it
seen
at
through.
least.
Yeah.
Why surprise me?
Right. Yeah.
You know, I'm there to learn. You know, if you want me to shut up, I would have shut up. You know.
In your initiation experience,
Yeah.
your first one, speak of it. Anything you wish to share?
So my first ones were with Malidoma Somé, and these are experiences that I would recommend for anyone. They were wonderful.
Mm.
Yeah, they're not his; they're tradition, and they're great, right? So there's
How would someone seek such an experience today?
they'd have to see a shaman that knows the system, and that's going to be hard.
The system is...
So earth, water, fire, nature, mineral, and what the processes are to be. Basically, you're being baptized into those elements.
Uh-huh.
So if I were to draw,
Is it Oshun?
it doesn't have to be any particular to anything.
I see.
Yeah, it's just to the element itself.
Mm.
So if you have a grandmother or grandfather in your life that you feel relates to one of those elements, or if you know their birthday, and you can probably figure it out that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can use them for that element.
I see.
It doesn't have to be some stranger from some other person's family.
Mm.
Yeah, they won't tell you that. You know,
They being...
in Africa they don't talk like that because their roots are with their ancestors, so they know it works. They don't recommend you go somewhere else.
Yes.
It works for them.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
and where I separated when I got malaria, and I saw what worked for them. Their herbs work for them when they get malaria. They don't work for me.
Ah.
They didn't work for me at all. The herbs work for them. You know what I mean? They could heal themselves in 2 or 3 days. My wife got malaria more than once. No problem. I had to be shipped out of Africa, put on a plane, and delivered back to the United States because nothing worked for me.
Ah.
You know?
Ah.
Yeah.
There may have been some... Are you certain that that's because it doesn't work for you, or could there have been other variables involved with you?
No, so we all got malaria at the same time. It was the worst strain of malaria. There's different kinds. And this was this was a killer strain. And I lost, I could show you pictures of, 150 pounds. I was I could reach in and feel my spine through my stomach.
Gosh.
I could reach in and grab it. I was really skinny, and then so they shipped me back here, and I had to stay at a doctor 24-hour watch, and within one night, within an hour, I shrunk even more, down to where my wrist, I could hold it like that with these 2 fingers and go like this. Mm. It was just like just shrunk.
Yeah.
And they didn't know what it was. They kept trying to figure out what it was. They didn't understand. Weren't equipped for malaria here, really. Mm. And so they figured it out that it was, at that point, they could tell it was a very serious strain, and they were able to cure it.
Talk about your experience during the first initiation.
Yeah, my first initiation was here. Before we went to Africa, it was the fire one, I believe. And so it was with other shamans, with Malidoma.
And what do they call themselves?
Shamans.
Really?
Yeah.
In this word, shaman?
Yeah, okay, so I'm talking about American shamans.
Mm-hmm.
Not African shamans.
Ah.
Yeah.
I understand.
Yeah, and over there they have different names.
Yes.
Yeah.
And over there, what are some of the names?
Babalawo in Nigeria, Bokor in some places. Most of the time when they translated it to me, it just meant doctor.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And in Burkina Faso, is there a name?
I can't remember what it is now.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Is it Dagara?
The Dagara have.
Dagara.
Yeah, the Dagara. There's 300 different languages in Burkina.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Just in Burkina.
Wow.
And people say they call them dialects, but the languages are so different. How dare they? Yeah, they're
right.
Incredibly different. Yeah.
Okay, so back to your first initiation. There were other shamans.
Yeah, so there were American shamans that were here. and people that were very experienced in this stuff.
This stuff
being initiated, basically baptized into the elements. You're baptized into them. So the fire.
And no name for this?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
Yeah. It's
No
a good
problem.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it was horrifying for me, the first one, because it was fire. It had large bonfires. They had to be a little bit beyond shoulder width. One fire here, one fire there, one in front of you. You had to walk through, and you had to sit and pray until the skin started smoking or bubbling or something like that, and then you were let go. You were allowed to leave. That was really hard for me because I had really, you saw in the book, my hair was kind of long, you know.
Yeah.
I was really worried about my hair, you know.
Sure.
So it was hard to concentrate, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But the hotter it got, the more I was determined to focus. Yeah, but I didn't like that. Yeah. But it was it was my first time being tested, and baptized by fire. Yeah, there's definitely I could see it being a necessity. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then of course the other elements later. Yes.
Yeah, but not in the order that I would have thought. They weren't for whatever reason. So after that, we did a nature one, where you sit in front of a tree until you can see it as a living being. And we did that one. That one didn't work that well for me. But just
Malidoma himself had trouble with this.
Yeah.
Is it not so?
Yes, he did.
He faked it first, right?
Yeah.
He tried to fake it, and they said, no, you go back
The
there.
elder said, that's not what's there.
Yeah.
Yep, that's true. I never saw anything, but I felt like I could feel it. I felt like I understood that the tree was a living creature, way more than anything I thought it was. Mm-hmm. So I gleaned something from it, but I didn't glean.
Didn't have the full experience.
Didn't have the full experience. Yeah.
Uh-huh. And had you, at this point in time, ever experimented with psychedelic drugs?
Up until that time?
Up till that time, had you?
I tried, what do you call it? That little pill.
Mescaline?
No.
Little pill.
Oh, what do you call that? That love pill.
Ecstasy?
Ecstasy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I tried that once,
Okay.
maybe twice.
I'm not sure I'd classify that as a psychedelic necessarily, but
okay.
some do. Yeah.
Acid, I tried a couple times. Hated it. I was like, I became a really violent person with acid. Yeah. I was really violent. Like, out of this world. So I never touched it again after that.
Wow.
Yeah. I can't touch that stuff. Yeah. So I tried those things, not mushrooms. Yeah, I tried them later, but I'm still not that familiar with mushrooms. Don't really understand them. Yeah. Okay. I know there was Terrence McKenna in different places, different other, I call them shamans, that really promote that, and it's a good way to open those doors, but I never got it.
I think it's very dangerous, actually. I think this is just me, my personal take, my bias or whatever, right? But I think we should have non-ordinary experience organically before we do something that's like flipping a switch that forces you into non-ordinary experience. Yeah. And that doesn't seem wise to me. Also, there's the problem of if you can't have organic non-ordinary experience, which actually I think you and I are having a little bit of even today, now.
Yeah. Definitely.
It's it's subtle, but I can feel it.
Yeah.
My heart.
Me too.
Yeah, I can feel it.
Yeah.
In bringing up these matters, in a sense, without being religious about it, the power comes because we're speaking about the power, right?
Yes.
And the origin beings and nature.
And like the Bible says, wherever two or more are gathered, that's where I will
be with you.
Yeah.
Yes. So, I'm very concerned because if that's your first experience of a non-ordinary situation and you're completely unprepared for it, and you have no power of your own, then you'll associate non-ordinary experience with the drug, and you'll think, oh, the key to non-ordinary experience is the drug, which does not seem good to me.
That's not good. Yeah.
An advanced person could maybe be
Separated.
safe,
Yeah.
right? And it would help them in some way. But a naive person is going to probably become very confused.
Become a drug addict.
Yeah. Or that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because the non-ordinary experiences are very compelling.
Yeah.
But another problem with the psychedelic experiences is that you have something similar to non-ordinary insight,
Yes.
but you can't bring it back across. It's worse than having had a dream.
Yeah.
Right? The dream you can at least tell the plot.
Yeah.
Right? The psychedelic experience, you have these insights, but they don't translate to when you're back in normal consciousness again.
Yeah.
Even if you write them down, right? It mostly just, for most people, there are exceptions, that just looks like gobbledygook.
Yeah.
You know?
It's true.
So there's something missing there, because real non-ordinary experience usually brings with it insight, it seems to me. Yeah. And the insight stays with you even after the experience.
That's the woke part. That's what woke means. That was the initial meaning of woke. Right there. Yeah.
The old meaning before it was compromised.
Politicized. Yeah.
Yes, before it was captured.
Yep. But then after that nature experience, it was still earth. It was still mineral. And the last one we did was water. Was water. The earth one was horrible.
They bury you?
Yeah.
Talk about it.
Yeah.
Tell us what happened.
So, yeah, we were buried. That was here before we left for Africa, we did that here. Thank God. I mean, they dig, maybe not 6 feet, but pretty close, right? You're way down. And you feel the full weight of that dirt on you when you're buried, right? And you have straws and things in your nose and in your mouth. And so maybe we're probably like 4 feet down, and there's probably like a couple feet of dirt on top of us, right? Something like that. But it's hard because you can feel the ants, and you're naked, and you can feel the bugs and insects and things crawling all around you. And every time you move to scratch yourself, you can't move again. That's it. You know, you move, you can't move again because the dirt settles in and fills that gap. So, you know, you freeze.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, this is like death.
It's death. And you hear the people crying and wailing over you, right? You
As if you've died?
As if you died. It's a full funeral.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. A funeral while you're alive.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's all night.
Oh.
I mean, not the entire night. I think it was maybe 4 a.m. when they dug us up. You know?
Wow.
But
so like 10 hours?
No. We probably started around 10 or 11.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's still
5 or 6 hours.
5, 6 hours underground.
Yeah.
And was there a ceremony before they bury you?
No.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, there is kind of as they're preparing it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not before. It's like part of it, right? Mm-hmm. So they're singing, you know, and they're preparing and digging everything. All the work you do in Africa has some kind of song to go with it. So you know, it's hard to tell sometimes where the ceremonies begin and end.
Yeah. But you made it through.
Yeah, I mean, we all made it through. It was totally safe. They're not gonna let you die.
Yeah, but I mean, psychically, you survived.
Oh, I expanded after that. That was one of my biggest openings right there. Yeah, that was my favorite. Hated it though.
Yeah. But
it was my favorite.
And when you say expanded, talk about what you mean.
Yeah, I felt like I could instantly now this is just me, right, talking, but I felt like I could instantly understand anything that was told to me, or anything I read, or anything I haven't read yet. I felt like I already got it. I felt like the earth gave me everything I needed to know. Instantly. I don't know if it's the sun. I don't know if there's a way of, you know, maybe the earth is filled with so many ancestors, or maybe I don't know how that happened, but
doesn't really require an explanation, does it?
It doesn't really require an explanation.
No.
Yeah.
So the gift of immediate understanding seemed to come to you.
Yeah.
Here.
And it was weird because it was like, okay, I'm a little clumsy, right? And I put something down and I watch it fall. But it was after that ceremony, I could grab it before it hit the ground.
I understand.
You know, but my awareness was intact, more than intact.
Yeah, your awareness was dramatically enhanced. Yeah. I relate. So the nature was with a tree.
Yeah.
What was the mineral?
That was one of the worst ones. I haven't described any of them very well, have I? They're all bad. Well, this one was hard because that was in Africa. And, in the Sahara Desert, everything's hot. Everything you touch is hot. Stones are really hot. And you lie on the hot sand, and it piles stones on you. You're covered in stones, and you sit there for maybe a couple hours. Granted, the ones underneath, the ones closest to you, cool off, which kind of helped, right? Mm-hmm. But it was horrible. It was absolutely horrible.
And again, singing and
yeah,
full shamans there, and
And the last one was weird because the last one was the water one, and that was like church. And that part really messed me up because I felt like I was getting baptized again. It's just a baptism. Mm-hmm. But he was explaining, the way he was explaining and the way the elders would explain it is that this is tradition. It was tradition. And it's like, well, how far back did it go? Was it Christian involved? Did you add from the... They're saying it's not. It's tradition. It predates Christianity. Mm-hmm. They even claim, Malidoma claims that the baptism in Christianity was originated from water baptism in Africa.
Yeah, that makes more sense.
And that's why John the Baptist used that system.
He looks pretty much like a shaman, right? He lives in the forest.
Lived in the forest, ate bees and honey.
Yeah, right.
As far as we know, he didn't eat anything else.
Yeah. And by the way...
locusts and honey.
Okay.
Yeah.
Locusts and honey.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the nectar of the bees, that's you got to wonder about the power in a beehive because it's touching the generative organs. And one thing not too many people know is that lots of regular plants that don't flower produce nectar. They produce it at the joints. And the bees will drink that nectar too, so do the hummingbirds, right?
Yeah.
So you're talking like hundreds of thousands of plants each day, this nectar coming to one place, right, the hive, and then being concentrated in the honey.
Yeah.
And you can see that there's a principle there. You follow?
Oh, yeah.
There's a principle that's embodied in those bees. And so the bees themselves have great power, right? But the principle is also very powerful.
That's why for me, whenever I think of Oshun, I see her as a middle-aged woman, really beautiful, strong-looking woman, just like powerful, but surrounded by bees.
Ah, yes, yes.
Surrounded by constant bees.
And who is Oshun?
Well, she comes from Nigeria, so it has nothing to do with Burkina Faso. They have their own, and I think they call her Mame Wata or something like that over there, but even that's Americanized. But the Oshun in Nigeria, because my family is Igbo Nigerian, in origin. But the Oshun, she's like the goddess of love, rivers, not oceans. That's different. That's Yemaya. But Oshun is a goddess of love and rivers and sex, relationships in general, connectivity, which has a lot to do with the bees and the honey. Stuff like that. Milk.
So what happened with the water?
Yeah, so not much as far as experiences, because it was just like a dip in the water and would come back out. But what happened to me as a Jehovah's Witness is like, I'm no longer a Jehovah's Witness. Mentally, I was able to let go. That these religions are just copying old traditions.
Yeah.
And they know they work, so they use them.
Yes.
Yeah.
They've what is it when the modern culture captures something? There's a word for this, and I've been looking for it the whole time.
I heard it earlier. Yeah. Appropriation?
Yes, they're appropriating. Thank you so much. Brilliant. Yes, that's it. It's a form of appropriation.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And not all appropriation is bad.
No.
We appropriate English from our parents, right?
Yeah.
And there's all kinds of there's a form that we in politically correct conversation presume is ethically flawed, but there's everything is appropriation in a way. Yeah. In the Blackfoot culture, probably this is called contagion, and it's not just negative, right?
Yeah.
Transfer of power is contagion. The two primary principles in Blackfoot magic are contagion. In Blackfoot spiritual traditions, I have to sort of edit myself here, and I'm not an expert on these things, but from what I've learned from Ryan, right, it's contagion and similitude, right, similarity and contagion. So you realized after the water, you're no longer Jehovah's Witness.
Yeah, and mentally I was able to completely let go. Before then, my sister, everybody was in my brain, yelling at me, and I was able to completely let go after the water baptism.
Okay,
it's like
so let's talk. That's really important. Yeah. So, kind of what you're saying is that the admonitory aspects of Christianity, coupled with the admonitions that you would receive from your family members, particularly your mother and perhaps your sister, were constantly at play in your mind.
Oh, yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah, I couldn't even date. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't do it well.
Yeah, because you can't tell if you're doing something that will cost you your family.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Even whether or not it's good or bad. Right.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, there's is this displeasing God and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But then there's also just the social thing of I will be ejected from social relationships. A terrifying threat.
It is. Yeah.
Terrifying threat to anyone.
Yeah.
Especially to a child or a teenager or something like this. Yeah. Unfortunately, the religions have been weaponized over time, right? So that they capture the specific vulnerabilities of our psyches and just double down on those things, right? Eternal damnation, eviction from relation, the loss of the soul, right? All these things.
Well, one of the soulless things that Jehovah's Witnesses actually do is they almost force you as a teenager or preteen even, like myself, I was 13, I think, or 14, when I got baptized. Because once you're baptized, you're committed. If I was never baptized, they could never take my family away. They couldn't threaten me with that, But they told me, Armageddon's coming next year, 1975. You got to get baptized, or else you're going to be dead,
Wow.
And so I got baptized.
Yeah, that's the other feature is the what is it? Eschatology, right? The apocalypse vision,
That's 100% Jehovah's Witness. Yeah.
I mean, it seems Christian too, because Revelation seems pretty eschatological, I think is the right word.
Oh wow.
But yeah, the world ending and the threat of that, and of course, the world is always ending.
Yeah.
But there are also times when the world is really ending too.
Yes.
Throughout history.
Oh yeah.
Right? It's not like there's one apocalypse.
Yeah.
There's this sort of
Ice
heartbeat
age,
of apocalypse.
All different kinds. Yeah.
Yes. And human and natural and so on. Right?
Floods.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Let's take a little break here, and then we'll come back and talk more about what happens in Africa.
Okay.
Great.